What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I got a bit of news. The Dolphins have made a couple transactions, so I want to talk about that. That's the big thing here today. But before I do, there's a couple other quick things I just want to mention real quick. So there's a report that Emmanuel Ogbah intends to attend Dolphins mandatory minicamp, and we are obviously still waiting to see whether or not Xavier Howard will show up to that. But, you know, I just say that because Ogbah was not at the voluntary stuff, which, I mean, obviously, who cares? It's voluntary. But, you know, the mandatory stuff is when it really starts to, you know, further the narrative for some of these guys, particularly Xavier Howard, and whether or not, you know, and to determine how things are going to turn out, right? So it's added context to the narrative, so that way, you know, we can eventually figure out how it's going to play out, right? And so, like I said, I mean, there's definitely a bunch of ways that it can play out if Xavier Howard does or doesn't go, right? You know, he could go and, you know, show good faith and then not show up to, you know, training camp. Or he could, you know, show up and just be good for the rest of the way and everything's all hunky-dory. Or he might not show up to mandatory minicamp, but then show up to fucking training camp. I said that already. Well, whatever. You get what I'm saying. There's a bunch of different ways, right? He could not show up to mandatory minicamp and then not show up to fucking training camp, and then obviously that would be a super huge deal, right? So there's a bunch of different ways it could play out. It doesn't, you know, when it comes to this upcoming mandatory minicamp, it is going to be an important piece in the puzzle going forward. But I think it's probably, I think the bigger thing to keep an eye on will be training camp. I mean, I do think, right, so if he does not show up to mandatory minicamp, I mean, I think that's a potential big deal, but it's only a potential big deal because there is some chance that they could get a deal worked out with him between now and training camp. And, you know, mandatory minicamp's only a very, very short thing. It's only like 2 or 3 days, if I'm not mistaken. It's super short. It's certainly no longer than a week, but I'm pretty sure it's only a few days, if I'm not mistaken. And they don't really do a whole lot. Training camp's obviously the big deal. And so if he were to skip that, that would certainly be a lot bigger deal than if he skips mandatory minicamp. So, you know, when that comes, right, I'm gonna make you know, because there will be reports about it, whether or not he shows up. And so, you know, we'll talk about it, but it is, and it could be potentially a big deal, but it is less of a deal than training camp overall. All right, I've said that enough times. I think you guys get it. Let's move on. So the next thing I wanted to say real quick is about the Baker extension and just add something to that. So I love Jerome Baker. I think he's certainly one of the best players on the team. He's great. You know, obviously I've mentioned that he's come from the great Adam Gase drafts. Real quick too, there was an article, I hadn't read really through it, but somebody wrote an article, I think it was Kyle Krabs, that the headline was simply that the 2018 draft class, oh, here it is. The Dolphins 2018 draft class is aging well entering fourth season. Now, like I said, I didn't read the article. My guess is that's in part because a bunch of those players are still on the Dolphins roster. And, you know, Jerome Baker just got an extension. But all of Adam Gase's drafts were fucking great. He hit on at least 50% of the players. He even, you know, got multiple stars, including Xavier Howard, who is a second round pick, that's still like the only star of the team. So anyway, back to Baker. I think he's great. I think it's great that they got him an extension, and he is definitely one of the better players on the team. However, when you do look at the numbers, it is a pretty big contract, and I have to admit that even for Jerome Baker, it's a bit overpriced. I mean, I'd rather pay him that kind of money than, like, you know, what they did with Kyle Van Noy last year, but it is a lot of money. and it's not going to help their cap situation going forward, even though it apparently doesn't affect this year's cap, because I guess he's still getting about the same amount for this year. So in other words, like, he's going to finish out this is the last year of his rookie contract. So he's going to still play this year on that, and then it'll go into effect next year. So it doesn't affect the cap this year, but it's not going to help anything going forward, because he is going to be making about $13 million a year. And as usual, the Dolphins front loaded it so that way, you know, they can cut him later if they want to be cutthroat and ruthless like they usually are. Which I fucking hate that. I hate that. But that's another one of those ways in which Brian Flores is being Bill Belichick and the Patriots. Speaking of which, though, we are now moving into, or just one more thing on Baker, actually, even though I'm kind of fucking up my segue there. But, so I did want to say, though, that it is a little bit, you know, overpriced, and he is going to be making a lot on a per year basis, especially for what you're going to get. But I mean, he's great. You know, he helps in all aspects of the game. I think he's a great piece to have on that roster and in that linebacking core. But of course, it is an 11-man sport, right? You know, 11 people on the field at a time, and so it takes the entire team. So, but I think he's an amazing piece in that, right? Him as a player, I don't think he's elite, right? I wouldn't call him elite. He's not like Zach Thomas, right? But he is a great player. I would label him as a great player, and certainly a wonderful piece. And especially since we drafted him, the Dolphins drafted him, just another reason why I will want them to give him the extension, because I want the Dolphins to be able to actually build through the draft. They say that they're doing that, and they certainly still have a lot of, you know, draft players from their past 3 drafts, even though they've already cut 3 of them, still on the roster. But where I disagree with most people is I don't think that they're very good at player evaluation or development. Gase was great at both of those things, particularly the player evaluation. He was phenomenal at it. Anyway, so let's get to the big news, though, because as I did mention, the Dolphins made a couple roster moves today. First of which, they cut or waived offensive tackle, I think he was a tackle, offensive tackle Timon Paris. Let's see, yeah, Timon Paris. So he, and look, Timon Paris, you know, he was a fringe roster guy, but he was just one of those handful of offensive linemen, you know, obscure random offensive linemen that they brought in this season, this offseason, to help figure out that offensive line. Because the fact of the matter is that offensive line is not set from a couple different perspectives. One, it's not set because we don't actually even know who all the 5 starting offensive linemen are going to be. And look, I do get that versatility is good, and I do get that early in the offseason program, it's good to move guys around. But when you get to training camp, no, I don't fucking like that shit anymore. And preseason games, because while that's good, and having guys that can come in and fill in and play at a high level in case another guy goes down and you have to shuffle the offensive line, having that versatility is amazing, and having the ability to do it at a high level is amazing, because you're gonna have injuries, and offensive linemen often have injuries, as we've seen a million times. So that's great. But one thing you also have to have is chemistry across that offensive line. So what that means is that at some point you have to determine who your 5 guys are going to be. You have to decide who you think the 5 guys are going to be and fucking put them in there so they can get time together and build that fucking chemistry. Okay? And that needs to happen before the preseason games begin, because that's when they're going to gain the most of their chemistry, is not in practice, but in those preseason games. And that way you can get them ready for the season, so hopefully they have somewhat of a cohesive unit by the time week 1 comes around. Especially for such a young, inexperienced team, and when you expect all of these super young guys to take giant steps forward, giant leaps forward, right? Which I think is an absolutely impossible and unrealistic expectation, especially since one of those guys, Solomon Kindley, is apparently practicing as a backup and not even right now is not even leading for that fucking left guard position. So that's concerning. And then of course you expect to probably even have a rookie at right tackle, which is Tua's blind side. So nothing about this offensive line is set. And so Timon Paris joined the Dolphins in May, obviously not that long ago. It's only June. So we're only halfway through June right now. I don't know if you know this, but May was just around the corner in the past, right? Like, we just passed through May. So it's literally the month right before June. So anyway, let's see. After spending time on Washington football team and Cleveland Browns practice squads last year, so again, fits, you know, a lot of these guys that they bring onto this roster fit a theme too. They love to take fucking waiver wire guys, cast-offs, you know, perennial nobodies, and think they're going to develop and find, you know, great gems out of these guys. And so far, that has been overwhelmingly not the case, because they're terrible at evaluation and they're also terrible at development. And also, they don't even give guys a chance to develop. They literally bring them in and then cut them almost fucking immediately. So like, they don't fucking, I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd. And I don't understand how anybody can look at how they go about their business and be like, oh yeah, these dudes are smart. They're so smart. They're fucking aces, bro. Ace in the hole. They're kings. They're just running fucking circles all over everybody. They're fucking geniuses. No, dude, they're absolute morons. And the way they handle business is super volatile and not going to it's not going to work. He has 4 appearances in his career, all with Washington in 2018 and 19, after being signed by the club as an undrafted free agent out of Stony Brook in 2018. So just add another player to the long list now. It's super long for 3 years of a regime of the players that they have brought in. And like, I don't know if anybody's done this, but I would love to see a list of all of the players that the Dolphins over Brian Flores and Chris Greer's tenure brought in. All of them, every single one of them, through free agency, through trades, through the draft, every single one of them. And then also, so that's the first list, is to find all of the players that are brought in. Then compare that against a list of all the players that are no longer here. And then a third list of the players that currently remain. And going from left to right there in those lists, it goes from super long of players that number of players that they brought in. And then when you look at the list of players that they have also gotten rid of from that previous list, it's pretty close to the same length. And then all of a sudden it gets super short because there's so much turnover on this roster. Anyway, so they get rid of this guy, Timon Paris, whatever. He's a nobody. So you might ask me, well, why do I care so much? I'm just making general points about their philosophies, which are fucking terrible and also very New England-y. So these are all New England philosophies, right? Everything he has learned has been through the New England fucking system. That's like literally all he knows. So, I mean, by the way, there is literally zero data to suggest that he is not trying to be the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick. There is no data to suggest that. Suggest it, let alone prove it. But there is overwhelming data that shows and proves that he is trying to be Bill Belichick and the Patriots. And guess what? Because the Dolphins signed a player today, an offensive lineman, another random obscure offensive lineman, but guess where he comes from? New England. The Miami Dolphins announced the signing of offensive lineman Jermaine, I'm going to fuck this dude's last name up, so I'm sorry, Jermaine Eluminor on Monday. I will figure that out at some point, maybe, unless they cut him next week. A day ahead of the start of the team's mandatory minicamp, the lone mandatory event for veterans between the end of the last season and the start of training camp. The Dolphins minicamp will run from Tuesday through Thursday, so that's tomorrow. So Tuesday, yeah, so like I said, 3 days. So that's tomorrow through Thursday. So we will find out pretty quick whether or not Xavier Howard's there. I mean, we'll find out if he shows up tomorrow, most likely. I can't imagine that news is going to be able to stay zipped up And but anyway, so let's see. Jermaine will likely join the team for the first time for the camp as he moves to South Florida after 2 seasons with the New England Patriots. Eliminor was originally a 5th-round pick by the Baltimore Ravens in 2017 out of Texas A&M, so obviously didn't last very long there. Went to the Patriots, was kind of a nobody with the Patriots for 2 years. Spent 2 seasons with the Ravens, was a nobody, appearing in 8 games as a rookie. He began the 2018 season on the Ravens practice squad before moving up to the active roster mid-season. Was traded to the Patriots in August 2019, appearing in 10 games that season. Then was listed as the team's starting right tackle in 2020. Okay, but saw an ankle injury sideline him from the middle of the season. Lovely. So by the time he finally starts to get his chance, he gets injured. Great, because they love to fucking take injury-prone guys as well. Not saying this dude is, necessarily. I don't know what his history is in that regard, but just saying. So that's wonderful. He still played in 12 games with 8 starts last season. And, you know, for New England, who wasn't particularly great last year, I do expect them to be better this year, especially because they're getting a lot of key pieces back on that defense. But so again, just back to this though, yet another New England player. So again, literally all of the evidence, 100% of the evidence proves Brian Flores is trying to emulate what the Patriots did and be the Patriots and Bill Belichick. Why? All of the players that he's brought over and continue to bring over, the numerous coaches that he's brought over from the New England system to implement into his system. Okay. And those are some of the coaches that have been retained, because there's been a lot of turnover, but a lot of the New England Patriots have still, Patriots coaches have remained. His defensive philosophy is exactly the same thing as Bill Belichick's. It doesn't matter if he's trying to put his own spin on it. It doesn't matter. It's literally irrelevant because it's the same philosophy. And frankly, what is putting his own? It's literally the same thing. It's a flowy defense. It's just a bunch of guys that fucking, you know, floater. It's a hybrid 3-4 defense. 3-4, 4-3 defense, right? It shifts between the two, and particularly on third down, it's just got a bunch of dudes at the line of scrimmage that move around so you can't really tell who's where. It's the same fucking thing as the Patriots. Then, when you look at the rest of his philosophies, the way he fucking, you know, works guys into the dirt and practices, the way he's super cutthroat with the way he fucking handles players and gets rid of guys super quick, etc., etc. Like, everything about him is a replica of the Patriots. And again, that's literally all he fucking knows. So anybody who claims that Brian Flores is not trying to be Bill Belichick and the Patriots is creating a fantasy world to suit their own narratives. Right? Because they want to be able to say that he's not trying to be Bill Belichick and blah, blah, blah. They want to be able to say that. Right? Omar Kelly wants to be able to say that I think Brian Flores has a chance because he's his own man. Even though he then follows that up with a bunch of reasons why he's not his own man and fucking is emulating the Patriots. Not to mention, he's also a sellout and a lapdog because all he does is he really fucking takes his marching orders from Stephen Ross. And the reason why I say that specifically and to the degree that I do is because, well, a couple reasons. One, because of the way that he handled the Kenny Stills situation and decided to side with the white male billionaire owner of the team over the player of color that he's responsible for, and also because he came in and acquiesced to the philosophy of shit the bed in 2019 so we can go get our small, undersized, injury-prone quarterback the very next year in the draft. I mean, he's garbage. He's a garbage coach. He's a garbage coach. He is. He's an absolute garbage coach. And he's trying to be Bill Belichick and the Patriots. And I hate every fucking bit of it. So, anyway, that's what I got to say, though. It's a bit longer than I expected to go with this video, but I obviously have very passionate feelings about all of these things. And I'm telling you, man, like, look, I wish I didn't have to be so, aggressive with the negatives, right? But because of the fact that the rest of the world creates these absolutely absurd, non-realistic fantasy worlds and ignores the facts, ignores the truth, cherry picks information just to suit their own narratives, and, disregards all of the bad shit just so that way they can continue to live in their fantasy worlds. Well, unfortunately, being the only person that points all this shit out, I have to fucking harp on it, and I have to fucking, talk about it ad nauseum because nobody else fucking does. Well, that's the life of the person who decides that they want to fucking be a complete truth teller, a 100% truth teller, and so it is. I've accepted that. People don't like me because they can't handle my raw fucking truth. I wish I didn't have to be that way, in a sense, right? Like I wish the rest of the world would be that way too. In other words, I wish the rest of the world at the very least would fucking acknowledge realistically the entire picture and not fucking make up bullshit excuses or for like Tua and the would-be interceptions that he threw, and to simply say that he was good at decision making because his 11-5 touchdown interception ratio says it, and then be like, oh, the fucking it's a made-up stat, it's some bullshit worthless stat coming from nobody's, when people add in that Pro Football Focus and Football Outsiders say he was among the worst in the league when you adjust for would-be turnovers. Not to mention a numerous other things. I just wish people would fucking include all of the data and be realistic about it. If that was the case, then I wouldn't have to harp on the negative quite so much because other people at least would be talking about it in some realistic fashion. But having said that, at the same time though, I will never apologize for being completely 100% real, even if people get fucking offended and can't handle the fact that I curse, or that I'm aggressive in my my vehemence and my passion for just raw, unfiltered truth, man. Anyway, all right. I'm going to get out of here. I hope you guys appreciate my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alert. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, find me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I'm out. I'll see y'all soon. Phins up.